Hello and welcome to this fourth presentation from C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, entitled The Silver Chair. Our story begins with a very real-life situation involving Eustace, who we met in the voyage of the Dawn Treader, who started out as the most insufferable brat anyone ever read about in English literature, but was rehabilitated by his introduction to Aslan, who is the Christ figure in these stories. We see him again, and also we're introduced to a classmate of his named Jill. Both are being harassed and bullied by their fellow students at what C.S. Lewis calls an experimental school. And here we see a very real problem that Lewis has with non-traditional schools. And we'll hear more about that. The opening scene shows Jill, who's probably in the 6th or 7th grade, we would say middle school, hiding behind the school gym, crying and wishing she could go to another school. Then Eustace appears. He's bullied too, because he's not good at sports, as C.S. Lewis wasn't. Even though everyone has noticed how Eustace has changed for the better from the last term, Eustace tries to cheer Jill up without much success, until he tells her about his adventures in Narnia, swearing her to secrecy. Jill only believes Eustace because she wants so desperately to escape the school, and it's a boarding school. But she doesn't see how Eustace's adventures, even if they did happen, can help her now. And this is what she says. But after all, what's the good? We're not there. We're here. And we jolly well can't get there. Or can we? That's what I've been wondering, said Eustace. When we came back from that place, someone said that the two Pevensie kids, that's my two cousins, could never go back there again. It was their third time, you see. I suppose they'd had their share. But he never said I couldn't. Surely he could have said so, unless he meant that I was to get back. And I can't help wondering, can we? Could we? Do you mean to make it happen? Eustace nodded. You mean we might draw a circle on the ground and write things in queer letters in it and stand inside it and recite charms and spells? Well, said Eustace, after he had thought hard for a bit, I believe that was the sort of thing I was thinking of, though I never did it. But now that it comes to the point, I've an idea that all those circles and things are rather rot. I don't think he'd like them. It would look as if we thought we could make him do things, but really we can only ask him. Who is this person you keep talking about? They call him Aslan in that place, said Eustace. What a curious name. Not half as curious as himself, said Eustace solemnly. But let's get on. It can't do any harm. Just ask him. Let's stand side by side like this, and we'll hold out our arms in front of us with the palms down, like they did in Ramandu's island. Whose island? I'll tell you about that another time. And he might like us to face the east. Let's see, where is the east? I don't know, said Jill. It's an extraordinary thing about girls that they never know the points of the compass, said Eustace. You don't know either, said Jill indignantly. Yes, I do, if only you didn't keep on interrupting me. I've got it now. That's the east, facing up into the laurels. Now, will you say the words after me? What words? Asked Jill. The words I'm going to say, of course, answered Eustace. Now. And he began. Aslan, Aslan, Aslan. Aslan, 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 repeated Jill. Please let us two go into... So, Eustace and Jill call upon Aslan, and then they are transported, and they run through a gate in the wall around the school, because now they are not being chased by the school bullies. Suddenly, they find themselves in a forest of enormous trees. As they walk through, they see what looks like a clearing ahead. When they come to the end of the forest, they discover that they are on the edge of a cliff. As Jill looks down, it seems as if the valley below is miles away. Eustace is afraid of heights, and he tries to pull Jill back from the edge. Jill doesn't want his help, and in trying to pull away from Eustace, she accidentally pushes him over the edge, and he goes falling to the valley beneath them. Before she has time even to think about what she's done, she realizes there's a lion next to her, blowing Eustace far away from them and safely letting him land on the ground beneath. When Jill recovers her senses, she sees that the lion is now sitting next to a stream of flowing water, and Jill realizes just how thirsty she is. If I run away, it'll be after me in a moment, thought Jill. And if I go on, I shall run straight into its mouth. Anyway, she couldn't have moved if she had tried, and she couldn't take her eyes off of it. How long this lasted, she could not be sure. It seemed like hours, and the thirst became so bad that she almost felt she would not mind being eaten by the lion, if only she could be sure of getting a mouthful of water first. If you're thirsty, you may drink. They were the first words she had heard since Scrub had spoken to her on the edge of the cliff. For a second, Scrub is Eustace. That's his last name. For a second, she stared here and there, wondering who had spoken. Then the voice said again, "If you are thirsty, come and drink." And of course, she remembered what Scrub had said about animals talking in that other world, and realized that it was the lion speaking. Anyway, she had seen his lips move this time, and the voice was not like a man's. It was a deeper, wilder, and stronger, a sort of heavy, golden voice. It did not make her any less frightened than she had been before, but it made her frightened in rather a different way. "Are you not thirsty?" said the lion. "I'm dying of thirst," said Jill. "Then drink," said the lion. Could I? Would you mind going away while I do?" said Jill. The lion answered this only by a look and a very low growl. And as Jill gazed at its motionless bulk, she realized that she might as well have asked the whole mountain to move aside for her convenience. The delicious rippling noise of the stream was driving her nearly frantic. "Will you promise not to do anything to me if I do come?" said Jill. "I make no promise," said the lion. Jill was so thirsty now that, without noticing it, she had come a step nearer. "Do you eat, girls?" she said. "I have swallowed up girls and boys, women and men, kings and emperors, cities and realms," said the lion. It didn't say this as if it were boasting, nor as if it were sorry, nor as if it were angry. It just said it. "I daren't come and drink," said Jill. "Then you will die of thirst," said the lion. "Oh dear," said Jill, coming another step nearer. "I suppose I must go and look for another stream then." "There is no other stream," said the lion. Aslan then tells her that he has called her and Eustace to Narnia because he wants them to rescue the Prince of Narnia, the son of King Caspian, who has been lost for 10 years. Aslan then gives Jill 4 signs she must remember, which will lead her and Eustace to the lost prince. The 4 signs are, first, that Eustace will meet an old friend when he arrives in Narnia who will help them. Next, they must journey out of Narnia north to the ruined city of ancient giants. Next, they'll find a writing on a stone in the ruined city, and they must do what it says. Last, they will know the lost prince because he'll be the first person that they meet who will ask them to do something in the name of Aslan. Before he sends Jill on her way, Aslan tells her how important it is for her to remember the 4 signs by repeating them several times each day. And here I think Lewis is wanting us to remember how important it is for us to read our Bibles every day and to remember the words of our Savior and Paul and Moses and the prophets of what God is speaking to us through our scriptures. Then Aslan blows her to Narnia to meet up with Eustace. When she arrives, she's amazed at how magnificent Narnia is. The castle, the people, a tall sailing ship in the harbor, all of it in contrast to how grubby she and Eustace look in their school uniforms. They are just in time to witness the departure of King Caspian, who is leaving Narnia for a voyage. Caspian is now very old, and Eustace doesn't even recognize him. And anyway, Jill forgets to tell Eustace about Aslan's first sign until Caspian has already sailed away. So, having muffed the first sign, they decide to spend the night at the castle. During the night, they are flown from their rooms on the backs of owls to a meeting of all the owls, where Jill and Eustace are told the story of Prince Rilian, who is the son of King Caspian. 10 years ago, Rilian and others were picnicking with the queen. The queen is bitten by a serpent and she dies. Everyone in the kingdom grieves. But Rilian becomes obsessed with finding the serpent and killing it. He goes out every day to look for it. Finally, one day, he goes out hunting for it and never comes back. After a kingdom-wide search by his father, King Caspian believes that his son, the prince, is now dead, along with his mother. So now, after 10 years, Caspian is off in search of Aslan to ask him who shall be the next king, now that the prince is probably dead. Jill and Eustace see how important it is to everyone in Narnia that they find the prince. The next sign is to travel north and find the ruined city of ancient giants, and the owls advise that the best guide for the children is a thing called a marsh wiggle named Puddleglum, who is part frog and part human. His hands and feet are webbed, and his arms and legs are longer than those of a human. And he's the gloomiest person that you would ever meet. He agrees to help Jill and Eustace by traveling with them. First, they must get through a mountainous region inhabited by giants. Then, as they cross an ancient giant bridge across a deep ravine, they meet a beautiful woman in green riding a splendid white horse, accompanied by a knight in black armor with his visor down, who is perfectly silent. The lady in green tells the tired, dirty, and hungry travelers that they can get excellent food and lodgings if they stop at the house of Harfong. And it's really a castle of the so-called gentle giants. Although the children know that they should be looking for the second and third signs, Jill and Eustace decide that warm beds, a bath, and good food are more important. When they get to the giant's castle, where they are fed very well, they discover that the giants intend to cook them and eat them at their autumn feast. Looking out the window, they see the remains of a giant city in ruins, and in rock letters is spelled, "Under me." They realize that failing to follow Aslan's command has gotten them into terrible danger, and they just barely escape from the giants, who chase them when they find that they have left. The children and Puddleglum hide in a cave near the old ruins, and they find themselves falling down the side of an underground slope. Deeper and deeper they fall, until they finally land at the bottom. Once they determine that they are still alive, they are met by a large army of underworld people who are even sadder looking than Puddleglum. They take the travelers to the ruler of the underworld, the Emerald Witch. When they get to her underground castle, they find that the witch has gone to inspect some diggings. They then meet a young man who appears to be in charge in the absence of the witch. He tells the travelers that it was he in the black armor they met, and the beautiful lady in green is the ruler of the underworld, whom he serves and adores. He claims she has promised to dig up to the outer world and help him conquer the people there so that he and she can rule together. Jill, Eustace, and Puddleglum immediately dislike and are disgusted by this young man. He also tells them that the witch has saved him from an evil enchantment by tying him to a silver chair each day for an hour, during which time he goes temporarily crazy and would kill others and himself if he were set free. After a while, the travelers get to see what this looks like. The underground soldiers march in at the appointed hour, and they tie the young man to the chair. Soon, he starts screaming and trying to persuade the children to untie him. That's the last thing they want to do until he screams, "In the name of Aslan, release me." The children realize they've disobeyed the last 3 signs, so they must obey this one. So they untie the man, who immediately takes a sword and hacks the silver chair to pieces. Then his image changes, and instead of looking fearful and angry, he looks heroic and happy. He finally tells them that he is Prince Rilian. But to their horror, the Emerald Witch appears. At first, she's furious, but then she smiles and begins to bewitch them by burning some green dust in the fire. Rilian, Jill, and Eustace have almost forgotten about Narnia and Aslan until Puddleglum tries to stomp out the incense in the fire, burning his feet in the process. In his pain, he calls out for Aslan, and immediately the spell is broken. Rilian takes his sword to attack the witch, who turns into a large serpent. Rilian, understanding now that she was the snake that killed his mother, cuts her head off. Immediately, the spell of the underworld is broken. The underground soldiers are liberated to return to their home even further underground. And Rilian and the others escape to the surface, where they find themselves back in Narnia. Caspian has returned to be reunited with his lost son, who is named king as Caspian dies. And Jill and Eustace are sent back to their boarding school by Aslan, along with the resurrected and now young Prince Caspian, who always wanted to see what the land of the humans is like. Aslan takes the 3 back, just in time to confront the bullies who had been chasing Jill and Eustace at the beginning of the story. And this is what happens. "Now, sons of Adam, draw your swords," said Aslan, "but use only the flat, for it is for cowards and children, not warriors, against whom I send you." "Are you coming with us, Aslan?" said Jill. "They shall see only my back," said Aslan. He led them rapidly through the wood, and before they had gone many paces, the wall of the experiment house, their school, appeared before them. Then Aslan roared so that the sun shook in the sky, and 30 feet of the wall fell down before them. They looked through the gap, down into the school shrubbery, and onto the roof of the gym, all under the same dull autumn sky which they had seen before their adventures began. Aslan turned to Jill and Eustace and breathed upon them and touched their foreheads with his tongue. Then he lay down amid the gap he had made in the wall and turned his golden back to England and his lordly face towards his own land. At the same moment, Jill saw figures whom she knew only too well running up through the laurels towards them. Most of them were the gang of the bullies. But suddenly they stopped. Their faces changed, and all the meanness, conceit, cruelty, and sneakishness almost disappeared in one single expression of terror. For they saw the wall fallen down, and a lion as large as a young elephant lying in the gap, and 3 figures in glittering clothes with weapons in their hands, rushing down upon them. For with the strength of Aslan in them, Jill plied her crop on the girls, and Caspian and Eustace plied the flats of their swords on the boys so well that in 2 minutes all the bullies were running like mad, crying out, "Murder! Fascists! Lions! It isn't fair!" And then the headmistress came running out to see what was happening. And when she saw the lion and the broken wall, and Caspian and Jill and Eustace, whom she quite failed to recognize, she had hysterics and went back to the house and began ringing up the police with stories about a lion escaped from a circus and escaped convicts who broke down walls and carried drawn swords. In the midst of all this fuss, Jill and Eustace slipped quietly indoors and changed out of their bright clothes into ordinary things, and Caspian went back into his own world. And the wall, at Aslan's word, was made whole again. When the police arrived and found no lion, no broken wall, and no convicts, and the headmistress behaving like a lunatic, there was an inquiry into the whole thing. And in the inquiry, all sorts of things about Experiment House came out, and about 10 people got expelled. After that, the headmistress' friends saw that the head was no use as a head, so they got her made an inspector to interfere with other heads. And when they found she wasn't much good at even that, they got her into Parliament, where she lived happily ever after. Eustace buried his fine clothes secretly one night in the school grounds, but Jill smuggled hers home and wore them at a fancy dress ball next holidays. And from that day forth, things changed for the better at Experiment House, and it became quite a good school. And Jill and Eustace were always friends forever. Thank you for your attention to this presentation, and I hope you'll join us next week for the C.S. Lewis presentation of A Horse and His Boy.